They say beauty comes at a price, but no one said the price would be flesh, bone, or blood. In a forgotten town draped in silence, a girl named June Belle wanted nothing more than to be perfect. And when love couldn't make her thin, she turned to something darker, something that feeds. Some rituals carve away the fat, others carve away the soul. The practical finger, a tale of hunger, of sacrifice, and of a chair that still rocks, even when no one's in it.
The house sat at the edge of town, just before the road turned into dust and pine. It was the kind of place no one passed by unless they meant to. White paint peeling, porch boards creaking, and a rocking chair that never seemed to stop moving, even when no one was in it. That was where I met her, Mrs. Mabel. I had rented the attic room for a month, hoping to escape the noise of the city and the noise of my own mind. She was quiet, always wearing a faded shawl, hair like cotton snow, and a soft, raspy voice like old vinyl spinning under dust. Every afternoon at 4, she'd sit on the porch with her tea, her hands folded in her lap, and her eyes somewhere far away. I started joining her, not for conversation at first, just to share the silence, until one day she spoke.
"You ever heard of a girl named June Belle?"
Her voice cracked a quiet like a twig underfoot. I shook my head. She didn't look at me when she said it, just kept rocking, staring at the pine line where the sunlight died early. Her voice cracked a quiet like a twig underfoot. I shook my head. She didn't look at me when she said it, just kept rocking, staring at the pine line where the sunlight died early. I didn't ask. Something about the air that day told me not to, but the next afternoon, I brought her a second cup of tea, and she began to tell me the story.
June Belle was born in the sweltering summer of 1919, in a house with no windows that opened and no air that moved. Her mother said she came out too big, too red, and too loud, crying before she even touched air. The women in that town talked. They always talked. Said June had too much cheek, too much belly, too much everything. She was a soft child. They'd whisper, like softness was a sin. By the time she turned 12, June knew the rules. Pretty girls got picked first. Pretty girls wore lace. Pretty girls got husbands from the houses up on the hill. And pretty in their eyes meant thin. Thin like wind chimes, like paper dolls. June wasn't thin. Not ever. She stopped eating cornbread first. Then meat. Then anything with salt or butter. She ran circles in the fields behind her house until her knees buckled. But nothing changed. God made you wide. Her aunt once said, not unkindly. Ain't no sense in cursing the shape he gave you. But June did curse it. Every night. In silence. In secret. And when Elijah came around, with his old work boots and his quiet, decent smile, she barely looked his way. He was kind. Too kind for someone like her. Because June didn't want kind. She wanted chosen. By someone rich. By someone who'd never been told no. She believed if she got skinny enough, sharp enough, small enough, someone like that might finally see her. When June turned 19, her parents gave up. The parties they used to drag her to, the socials, the harvest dances, they stopped coming. No one asked about her anymore. Not the seamstresses. Not the church boys. Not even the mothers with sons too slow to find better. That silence stung worse than the words ever did. Elijah, still in town, still wearing that same damn smile, came by with eggs once a week. June never thanked him. She couldn't, because deep down she knew he was real, and kind and steady, and that terrified her more than anything. She started cutting her food into pieces, so small they dried up before she ate them. Drank vinegar with water. She even tied a belt around her waist at night until her ribs screamed in protest. Still, her body betrayed her. The more she hated it, the heavier it seemed to cling to her. And then one summer afternoon, her father slammed his hand on the kitchen table and said, Elijah asked again. June looked up. And we said yes. It wasn't a proposal. It was a verdict. The wedding came fast. No church bells, no white lace. Just the hollow sound of a name being handed over like a receipt. June didn't cry. Didn't speak. She moved into Elijah's little house by the fields with a heart as heavy as her hips. But something happened. 2 weeks in, she woke up feeling lighter. Not just in mood. In body. Her waist shrank. Her arms slimmed. Her cheeks hollowed like a peach drying in the sun. She hadn't changed a thing. People noticed. The same women who once whispered now stared. Men tipped their hats. The grocer offered her apples on the house. Elijah said nothing. He just watched her with eyes full of something that wasn't quite joy. And at night, when she pretended to sleep, she heard him in the kitchen, sharpening a blade, humming a tune she didn't recognize. June should have felt triumph, but instead she felt cold. It was a Sunday evening when June finally asked. The wind had blown strange all day, too warm, too sweet, like something rotting beneath honeysuckle. Elijah was sitting by the window, carving something with a pocket knife. As usual. She cleared her throat. What happened to me? He didn't look up. What do you mean? You know what I mean, she said. I didn't do anything, but I keep losing weight. There was a pause. Then Elijah sighed. He placed the knife down and turned toward her, his face calm. But his eyes were old that night. Not tired. Ancient. You wouldn't believe me if I told you. June's voice came out small. Try me. He sat beside her. His hands were rough from years of work, but warm. My family, we have a secret. Been passed down for generations. Came from a stranger during the war. A man dressed in rags who slept in our barn one stormy night. Said he was a healer. Or a cursed soul, maybe both. But he left something behind. A ritual. June stared. Elijah took a breath. If you love someone enough, and you offer them a piece of yourself, an actual piece, they can shed what weighs them down. June's stomach twisted. What kind of piece? Elijah lifted his left hand. It was whole. Then his right. The ring finger was missing. Gone clean to the knuckle. June felt bile rise in her throat. You mean you fed me your finger? He didn't answer. Didn't need to. She remembered the soups he insisted on cooking. The meat she didn't recognize. The bitterness she'd chalked up to herbs. She stood too fast. The room spun. Elijah reached for her gently. You wanted to be seen. I just wanted you to be happy. Outside the wind howled. Inside, June Belle began to tremble. Is it permanent? He shook his head slowly. It fades. Then quieter. unless you feed it again. The years passed, slow and steady like mud dragging through a creek bed. June didn't speak much of what she knew, didn't ask more questions either. She had what she wanted, a waist small enough to pull envy from every corner of town. And then came Lila, born on a frostbitten January morning. Their daughter was everything June had once dreamed of being. Pale skin like bone china, almond-shaped eyes, hair dark as coal water. She was beautiful almost, because even as a baby Lila had roundness, plump cheeks, thick arms, a belly soft and full. By the time she turned 13, June's old fear returned with a vengeance. She watched her daughter grow and grow, and the tighter the corsets, the stricter the diets, the crueler June became. "You won't end up like me," she'd whisper into the dark. Even Elijah's gentle warnings couldn't soften her obsession. Lila was her second chance, and second chances don't come without sacrifice. The Whitlocks were a wealthy family, distant cousins of bankers, landowners, and old Southern names people still whispered like prayer. They were looking for a bride, and they were specific. Measurements down to the quarter inch, waist, thigh, wrist, even the length of the neck. Lila missed it. Just barely. June didn't cry. She clenched her jaw. She turned to Elijah. "Do it again." His face crumbled. Years had passed since the first time. And the ritual? It had rules. It was never meant to be done more than once. "We don't know what it'll do to her," he warned. "She'll be fine. She's young, strong." Elijah stood in the barn that night, hand trembling, holding the small cleaver wrapped in linen. The air smelled of hay, blood, and something ancient. Lila didn't cry when they explained. She just asked one question. "Will it hurt?" June lied. "No." At midnight Elijah knelt. He kissed his daughter's forehead. And then he cut off her finger. Not a sliver. Not a tip. The whole damn thing. Right down to bone. Lila screamed. A scream so shrill it startled the crows from the trees. June boiled the stew. Just like before. Herbs, salt, marrow. She stirred with shaking hands. Whispered the words Elijah had taught her. Words that weren't English. Words that burned her tongue. Lila drank. The next morning, she woke up lighter. So light she floated when she walked. And the Whitlocks came calling. The engagement was set within a week. But Elijah wouldn't sleep. Couldn't. Because every night after, he heard scratching beneath the floorboards. And Lila, she started having dreams. Of fingers. Of hundreds of them. All crawling back home. The wedding was held under the oak trees, hung with lanterns and lace. The Whitlocks spared no expense. Lila wore ivory. Her smile was paper thin, her waist thinner. Everyone said she looked like a dream. But Elijah couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching. That something had noticed what they'd done. That night, after the guests had gone and the candles had burned low, Lila sat on the edge of the bed and whispered, "I can't feel my hands." June brushed it off. "It's nerves, baby. Just nerves." But Lila's fingers began to twitch, then curl, then lock into fists she couldn't unclench. A week passed. Her eyes sank into their sockets. Her skin turned gray around the mouth. She stopped eating. "It's just exhaustion," June said, almost pleading. Elijah said nothing. He just watched his daughter fade. And then came the crying. Every night, from the new house the Whitlocks had built for the couple, a sound echoed through the hills. Not human crying, scratching, whimpering, gnawing, as if something inside was trying to crawl out or in. Then the bleeding started. Lila would wake to find claw marks on her arms, her back, her thighs. Her bedsheets soaked through with red. No memory, no dream, just wounds. A maid quit. Said she saw shadows move on the ceiling, even with all the lights on. Then the groom left, disappeared in the middle of the night. His horse found 2 towns over riderless. And Lila? She just kept shrinking. One morning she came home. Her eyes were black, her mouth stitched in silence. She held out her hands. They were shaking. "Mama," she whispered. "It's still hungry." June backed away. For the first time in her life, she looked at her daughter and felt fear. Elijah stepped forward. "We should have never done it twice." June turned to him, desperate. "Then do it again." Elijah's face twisted with horror. "3 times? Are you insane?" She grabbed his shirt. "She'll die." He looked at her, long and deep, as if he were seeing her clearly for the very first time. Then he said, "She already is." The 3rd time was never supposed to happen. The ritual had warnings, spoken and unspoken. Elijah's grandfather had said it plainly once, back when Elijah was just a boy playing with corn-husk dolls. Use it once, it takes from the body. Use it twice, it takes from the soul. Use it 3 times. He never finished the sentence. But that night, under the shaking roof of their kitchen, June placed a dull meat cleaver on the table. "If we wait, she'll be gone by morning." Lila sat in the corner, rocking, whispering to herself. Blood soaked through her nightgown like ink in water. Her skin looked stretched too thin, her bones visible like white worms wriggling under paper. Elijah wept. Quietly, like a man burying his own heartbeat. He kissed Lila's forehead, then took his wife's hand. "We do this together." The blade came down. Not once, twice. Their screams twisted into the walls. 2 fingers, one from each. June boiled the water, added herbs that burned her eyes. Elijah whispered the words with a mouthful of blood. Lila drank. That night, they did not sleep. The wind outside howled like a thing with lungs. The rafters creaked, as if something heavy paced across them. June sat at Lila's bedside, watching, waiting. Midnight came. Then 1 a.m. Then 2. At 2:37 a.m., Lila opened her eyes. Black. No whites. No pupils. Her mouth opened, and a thin scream poured out, not loud, not high, just wrong. It scraped the air like metal teeth on glass. Elijah rushed in. "What is that sound?" The walls were breathing. The floor pulsed beneath their feet. Lila sat up slowly, bones cracking like ice. And she smiled. Not like their daughter. Like something wearing her face. Then came the knock at the door. Not once. Not twice. 3 times. From the ceiling. Lila turned her head toward it, and giggled. That was when June knew. What they'd fed wasn't done feeding. They found her the next morning, or what was left of her. The bed was soaked through, not just with blood, with something darker, something that smelled of rot and old teeth. Lila's body was twisted, folded in ways no human body should bend. Her arms were over her head. Her legs knotted like rope. Her spine arched so far it cracked the wooden headboard. And her face was gone. Not torn, not scratched, just missing. A flat surface of skin where eyes, nose, and mouth should have been. A mask made of meat. June collapsed. Elijah didn't scream. He just sank to his knees and began to pray, whispering names of saints and ancestors who would never answer him. They wrapped her in white linen and buried her behind the house. The Whitlocks paid them off. Quick and quiet. Said Lila had a fever. Said she wandered into the woods and got hurt. No one asked more. No one wanted to know. But June knew. And she couldn't stop hearing it. That knock. From the ceiling. 3 times. It came again. The night after the funeral. And again. 2 nights later. Always at the same time. 2:37 a.m. June sat in the hallway with a shotgun across her lap, staring at the ceiling. But nothing ever dropped down. Because whatever it was, it didn't want in. It wanted out. She heard the scratching, then the giggling, then the whispers. Hungry. More. Elijah boarded up the room, sealed it with salt ash crosses prayers. Didn't work. The laughter still seeped through the cracks like smoke. Until one night it stopped. Completely. And that silence was worse. Because silence meant it had moved. And it had found a new door. A new hunger. And it wasn't finished. The earth behind the house was still soft. June stood over the grave, her hands buried deep in her coat pockets, her breath fogging in the cold. No headstone. No cross. Just a rectangle of disturbed dirt that looked too small for all that pain. Elijah hadn't spoken in 2 days. He sat on the porch in silence, carving nothing into nothing, his eyes hollow like knots in wood. Every now and then, his lips moved, but no sound came out. June tried to pray. She tried to scream, but all that came was a dry, aching sound that scraped her throat and fell flat in the empty air. Sometimes she thought she still heard footsteps upstairs. Sometimes she thought she saw Lila's shadow behind the curtains flickering, waiting. But when she opened the door, nothing was ever there. The town moved on, of course. It always does. People whispered, as they do, but no one knocked on their door. No one offered casseroles. No one brought flowers. It was as if Lila had never existed. And June began to fade too. She forgot meals, forgot to change clothes, forgot what day it was. Some days, she stared into mirrors for hours, waiting to see if her reflection would move first. And every night, she sat in Lila's old room, her fingers pressed to the floorboards, listening, longing, but the scratching was gone. Even the whispers. Only the silence remained. And somehow, that silence felt heavier than any scream. Sometimes Elijah would wake her up, finding her on the floor with her ear to the wood, tears dried on her cheeks. He'd whisper, "She's gone, June." And June would nod, but she never really believed it, because something deep inside her knew. The dead don't stay buried when you fed them pieces of yourself.
Years passed. I never meant to stay in that town so long, but something kept me there. Something in the quiet. The way the trees leaned toward the house like they knew its secrets. I hadn't seen the old woman in days. Mrs. Mabel. I thought maybe she'd passed, quietly, like a lamp flickering out in a storm. But on the morning I left, I found her sitting on the porch again. Same chair, same shawl, eyes fixed on the woods. She turned as I stepped onto the creaking floorboards, gave me a slow, soft smile. Not kind, not cruel, just knowing. I offered her a gentle goodbye, said I hoped the winter would be kind this year. She chuckled.
Winter's only as kind as the things we buried before it.
Her voice was thin as breath, but it cut straight through me. She reached for my hand. I hesitated, then took hers. It was cold and missing something. One finger, the ring finger. My stomach turned. I looked up. Her eyes were still soft, but behind them, there was something watching me. Something old. Something that remembered. She let go of my hand, stood up without a word, and walked toward the woods. The hem of her dress whispered across the porch, and just before the trees swallowed her whole, she turned, smiled, not sweet, not wicked, just like Lila. I stood there long after she was gone, heart thudding like fists on a coffin lid, and for the first time since I'd arrived, I noticed the rocking chair behind her was still rocking, even though no one was in it.